water management plans for healthcare facilities. Now, um, I'm part of the Department for Public Health. We are accredited health department, and get this out of my way here. I am part of the Public Health Protection and Safety branch. I'm in the division office. And so this water management plan presentation was scheduled. I have been doing this with the state for about 3 years now. And of all of the water management plans that we have seen from various facilities, from the largest hospitals to the smallest long-term care facility, it has been a challenge to find a really well done, effective water management plan. So don't feel if anything seems out of line here or it seems different than what you have, everybody's in the same boat, but you need to know what CDC expects and what CMS expects and what the Joint Commission is expecting. And so that's why I'm bringing this information to you. So I'm hopeful that by the end, you're going to be able to apply the tools that we have, both from CDC and CSTE, in looking at your knowing what the essential elements are and being able to take it to what you have in place right now and critically assess that and see how you are going to be able to modify or develop a comprehensive document that actually addresses all the additional elements of a functional water management plan. There are links in there, and if you do go to pick up that water evaluation tool, you can see how it's scored. This is based on what CDC put together years ago, back in 2021. So this is how to develop a water management plan to reduce Legionella growth and spread in buildings. It tells you in this plan, and the link is there, how to find the building water systems that you need to do the measures for, how to assess the risk, how to apply control measures, and how to make sure it's effective and running. And so the CSTE plan, they have a wonderful resource page, Legionnaires page at cste.org. But what they wanted to develop, and this, the work group, the subcommittee I was on included people from CDC and I believe CMS, also from every state. And so we have just a blueprint for what these plans are supposed to look like, regardless of what state you are in the country, and this is what it should be. And what we need you to understand is that it's supposed to be a detailed written document. It needs to talk about a comprehensive set of policies and procedures that you're going to use. It should be building specific and describe processes and procedures for 8 key elements. There's 8 sections to this. And this includes what's in ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, Standard 188, and then the CDC toolkit. So it's really, it's more than you know as we start this. So what is a water management plan? Water management plans are written documents, typically electronic. It should be dated. So every time you go in and review something, change something, update the date. If I see a water management plan dated 2018, that's probably not current. If I see one that was from March of 2024, I'm going to feel like you are on top of things. You know what you're doing. It's usually best if the water team actively creates a site-specific document. Now, there are templates online, but if you're going to use it, make sure you read it. Make sure it matches your facility. Different facilities have different floor plans, premise plumbing, water features. If you are part of a hospital system and you borrow a water management plan from another facility, in or out of your organization, same thing. Look and edit out the previous author's identifying information. I saw one plan, I started to read, I thought, this looks fantastic. And then it said, this is for, I'm in Kentucky. It said, we will report all problems to the Marquette County Health Department. I'm thinking, is that Wisconsin or Michigan? That's not yours. Make sure all that stuff is out if you are going to use what your site says you're going to do, but then also be absolutely sure the text reflects what you will do. It should identify site-specific building water systems, site-specific control measures, and it should identify specific job responsibilities. One thing we're starting to see as we see more and more Legionella, I mean, it's kind of the buzz and it's going around, is we will get contacted by a facility that says, we need to do Legionella testing. No, don't do. You need to do your WICRA first, and you need to make sure your WICRA is really well done. And then you need to sit down and you need to put together a water management plan, and that tells you how you're going to sample, who you're going to use, what you're going to do with the results when you get them back. Because if you go out and you do sampling and you have no idea what to do with the results when they get there, it's pointless. It's not going to be helpful. So the correct order to this is a really good WICRA, like we talked about last week. Then you put together a really functional water management program with a written water management plan. And then from that, you can do your testing. So the 8 sections in a good water management plan are, and this is what the evaluation tool will score. When I go through each slide that comes after this, I'm telling you the elements that are actually scored in the CSTE toolkit. And to be for a healthcare organization, you're supposed to have all 8 of these sections. A majority of the items have to be done or filled out correctly. Otherwise, you will be, it's not considered an adequate plan. So I'm not giving you fluff, but I'm giving you the essential elements. So section 1 is the team. Section 2 will describe the entire building water system, the potable supply, the cold and hot water distribution, and your medical devices. The separate section, number 3, is an actual flow diagram. We don't see this very often. Section 4 is figuring out where your areas of high at risk for Legionella growth and spread, and that's your WICRA is going to support this. Section 5 are your control measures and your monitoring plan, and this is where you really need facilities to start chiming in. And then corrective actions when control limits are not met. Section 7 tells how you will ensure your program is running as designed and is effective. This is where the Legionella sampling may come in. And section 8 is documenting and communicating your plan's implementation activities. So 8 separate sections. The section 1 is the team. So with this team, you need to specifically identify, to take out your pencils and note taking, because these are all really critical. You'll be able to see it in the tool if you open that up, and I'm going to tell you about this. So you need to specifically identify a multidisciplinary group within your facility who have the skills and the authority to effectively develop and implement it. So you need somebody from facilities administration or building management, somebody that is in the C-suite, somebody that can say, yes, we're going to do that. Yes, we're going to invest in this. No, I mean, you have to have that. You need someone from facilities engineering or maintenance department. These people all have to be part of the team, not just knowing about it or being reported to, but when there's a meeting, they need to be there. Personnel with expertise, that's you all, in infection prevention. People with an understanding of facility accreditation standards. So that might be your DON. Then your team members have to be identified as to who they are with responsibilities. Since you're supposed to go in and update this plan, it's supposed to be a living document, dated and all that. It is not appropriate to just put a job title in there as building, facility, hospital administration will do this. No, who in hospital, you have to have that person. And you have to define what they're going to do. And these are 4 tasks that specifically have to be addressed. 1, who is implementing the water management plan and will direct the corrective action as needed? Which of the people on the team will maintain a working knowledge of the facility water systems? Who on the team Identify system control locations and the control limits that you're going to be measuring at those locations. And then who is going to monitor and document that the water management program is performing the way it should be as per what CMS wants and what Joint Commission wants in their environment of care. So the public water supplier, so section 2 is where you start describing your building water supply. So the first thing that has to be noted is who is your public water supplier and where does it come from? Is it groundwater? Is it surface water? Going back to the Flint story, that would help you. And what treatment does it have when it's at the water treatment place? What type of disinfection do they use? Is it chlorine that's coming in, chloramine, UV light? What are they doing to disinfect the water before it comes to you? How many places does it come into your facility? Do you have one main? Do you have an outside building that has another one? So that you have different places where water's coming in. And then what are basic incoming water quality characteristics? When it comes in from the city, what is the disinfectant residual? What is the pH? What is the temperature when it's coming into your building? You need to have a section where you describe the cold water. And this should include the type of piping material. It matters whether it's copper, whether it's hex, or PVC. What is the age of your plumbing system? And does it change over time? Have you had additions? Do you have a cold water storage area? How many outlets that are cold water are in the facility? Do you have flow restrictors, aerators? You can say every cold water has an aerator on it. That's enough. You don't have to, give me an itemized, but if there's only certain ones, that's appropriate. Are there wand attachments, drinking fountains, etc. For hot water, is it recirculated? What kind of piping is conveying that? Its age, type, and extent of any insulation used to help maintain temperature. What are the number of hot water outlets? And are there any thermal mixing valves within the facility? Water heating method? Is it a boiler? Is it a hot water heater? How do you take care of this? Do you have expansion tanks? Do you have that set up? Do you have mixing valves? And how many heating units are there? So we want to know tell me about the age, model, and manufacturer of the heating units. Are they electric, gas, or oil? It depends on how hot you can get it and different aspects to it that makes it more risky for Legionella. What is the capacity of the units and what are the temperature settings? You need a description still within here of any secondary treatment, water softeners, filters that are put on if they're at point of use or otherwise, and do you have a supplemental disinfectant treatment? Put that all in the description where that's what is being looked for in an appropriate water management plan. Also, what are your devices? Do you have hot tubs? Do you have Whirlpool spas? Do you still have a decorative fountain? Do you have ice machines? What else is connecting to the building water system? Do you have cooling towers or evaporative condensers, perhaps on the roof? Do you have equipment with water spraying functions? So do you have irrigation, fire, emergency eye wash systems? Do you have sprinklers outside? Is there any kind of conservation system that impacts it? Still in section 2, what kind of medical procedures or devices, and here comes your WICRA specifically, that may expose patients to water droplets? That's what we're looking for. The droplets. It's also aerosol is that explanation. Is the definition of that, but we're looking for air containing water. So hydrotherapy tubs, respiratory therapy equipment, humidification devices, places where people might be more vulnerable to infection. The plan is supposed to show that you thought through everything. So do you have bone marrow units? Do you have oncology floors, intensive care? What about clinical support like dietary, central supply, where there could be aspects that contribute to spread by aspiration? Include all components and devices that can contribute to Legionella growth and spread. So this is the flow diagram. This is described in the CDC document. There's I actually picked this up out of there. Oops, let me go back. Sorry, I hit my fingers too heavy. This shows how water is supplied to the building, how it is processed, distributed, and used throughout the facility. And then the diagram and the text should include all areas of potential concern, such as dead ends. So if at these sinks and showers, because of the way the building is set up, and you should be indicating that we have some dead legs in our rooms. So you have receiving right up here. It talks about where the municipal water comes in, how big the pipe is, where it's coming from. This shows that it goes to fire suppression. This might not be for a hospital, but that they're saying this is where we need to check to make sure the chlorination is appropriate. There's another backflow preventer. And then this is how it gets distributed for cold water. Some of it goes to the cooling tower, some of it goes to our fountain, our ice machine, sinks and showers, and that's floors. It's got defined by the floors. And then as you come down, you have your different water heaters and where do they supply. So you can, it's not a blueprint for sure, but it at least shows you where your water is moving through and where you think you need to have checks and balances on the system. So section 4 is the areas of highest risk for LP growth and spread. Now that's significant. And this is going to be a really chunky section. And this is going to take the most work, I think, to put together. So you need to understand what areas within are prone to low water flow or stagnation. And that would be a dead leg, which is, plumbing used to run this way. We don't need it anymore. So let's just cap it off, leave that standing pipe right there and, drywall right over it. Well, you've now got a little place that can accumulate biofilm and provides a great place for microorganisms to thrive and be sort of a little reservoir within your whole system. So you're looking for areas where you could have that, where sediment might accumulate. You want to look at backflow preventer installations, areas for potential cross connections, hot and cold water storage, water lines with temperatures in a range that would support Legionella growth, and areas where you tend to see low disinfectant levels. This means that you need to be continually measuring disinfection, temperature, and pH. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people say, we measure temperature, disinfection, and pH, and like there's no record of it. So if you don't have a person doing it and you don't have a means of recording that, then you didn't do it. You really need to look maybe even into some digital measures. So section 4, you want to look at hot. These are all elements in the evaluation tool. So it's looking for these. Have you described hot and or cold water storage tanks and water conditioning? Are there areas defined in the plan where water may be stagnant for periods of time, including dead legs, wings or rooms that are vacant, temporarily unused, or rooms that have been repurposed, or areas with variable temperature or disinfectant level that says the water has been standing in that pipeline for longer than usual? Areas where you have consistently low or no residual disinfectant. Have you defined in the plan areas where you have temperatures that would support Legionella growth? And with the anti-scalding regulations, this is really going to be tricky. Really, hot water should be stored above 140. Hot water in circulation should not go below 120. And cold water should be stored and circulated below 77. This means you need things like thermal regular mixing valves or UV something that's going to control it if you've got water that comes out of your tap at the highest at like 103. You've got an issue right there, and that's something that has to be addressed. Fixtures of concern. Are you using aerators on any of your faucets? Do you have shower wands? Anything else that would aerosolize water? And then what about water fixtures or devices that are conducive to Legionella growth and spread? So cooling towers are big. Any decorative fountains, ice machines, hot tubs, And any areas that you identified in your RCRA need to come in here. Or if a module 11 was done for you and there have been things on there as well that maybe you didn't pick up, those need to be dealt with in the program as well to follow up and show that you're addressing it. So section 4 continues. You need to talk, where do you have your backflow prevention devices? Do you have automated water treatment systems? Do you have high efficiency drift eliminators on your cooling towers? Do you know that your cooling towers are located in areas that are safe? That is, they're not near any building air intake. They're at least 25 feet away. And that you have water recirculation when uses becomes intermittent. Is your system piping designed to avoid dead legs? Looking at every part of it. And then does your cooling tower system comport with ASHRAE Guideline 12 and the CDC recommendations for cooling towers? So section 5, so that's all in 4, and that's a big chunk, and that's going to take a lot of work. Section 5 is the 3 types of hazard. It is how are you going to control this? So there's typically 3 types. You want to make sure you have very low water age, very minimal stagnation, because that's where you get the water temperature goes down in that, the disinfection gets eaten up, and bacterial growth is promoted. You want to make sure your disinfectant levels are consistent throughout the system and that you have thermal control of the premise plumbing water. Those are 3 big areas for control. At each hazardous location identified in section 3, you should have control limits. What is the maximum minimum water temperature? What is the maximum minimum disinfectant concentration that we need to maintain at that spot? And so that you have a way to say, this is in line or out of line with what we need. Section 5, again, you need to have specific control point locations. What is the parameter you're going to measure there? Are you going to measure the temperature, the pH, the disinfectant level, and what's that acceptable level or range? What are your control limits? How often is it going to be monitored? So if I see we check temperature on a yearly basis, or we check it quarterly, there's really not very much in healthcare where you're checking the health of a system that you can measure quarterly and get away with it. Especially something like temperature, where it can go up and down depending on whether insulation got knocked off, whether there's been accumulation of sediment. There needs to be a better way to look at it. There are ways to put a monitor on a line so that you can keep track of temperature, and that's really helpful. And then you need a sampling plan that would help you look in response to unanticipated changes in the building water system. We'll go into that in a little more detail. And then making sure a way that you can show that the design configuration and where it's put on the roof or outside of your building is in accordance with Guideline 12 and CDC recommendations. And this may be something you have to look at if you're in an older facility. So section 6, what are you going to do if the controls are out, if things aren't working? So you need to have a plan for identifying and addressing the areas of the facility or building where the water may become stagnant. You need to look, what are you going to do to eliminate that pipe work? If it gets isolated or something happens, you change use, you change we see things where they've had dialysis within rooms, and that's not a daily thing. So what are you going to do when it gets isolated or pulled off? What about occupying rooms that have been closed off, wings that have been cut off? What are you going to do with flushing and monitoring? How do you know that your flushing has been effective in that area? So you need a startup and a shutdown procedure. And this is also part of what CMS is requiring. And that your building and facility does not have vacant rooms or closed off area. That you have an action plan for looking at any kind of a high-risk aerosolizing water feature that you have left in place. So going back to the aquarium question from last week, if it doesn't have a bubbler or an active way that aerosol is generated into the space or room around it, a still water is just maybe quietly evaporating, but it's not an active, aerosolization of water. In this section, you have to identify the person responsible for taking corrective actions and the time frame for those actions. So if you see something is out, who is responsible for that, in which part of the system, and how long do they have to get that taken care of? And it identifies notification procedures when the control limits are exceeded and you have to do something to correct it. And then what happens if even if you do something and you still are finding that you've got Legionella, what are you going to do then? This all has to be down on paper and something that's thought through, and including your environmental Legionella testing program. So we have seen situations where a facility will have a problem with the Legionella exposure and they have not thought this through. And so they have a testing agency that just keeps coming up with, it's negative this week, and then wait 2 weeks, it's positive again. It's negative this week. I mean, it goes on and on and on. There's no defined way that they're going to respond to it. They just let themselves be at the mercy of their contractor. So this is something to think through way ahead of the time that you actually begin any kind of environmental Legionella testing. I'm saving time. I'm trying to go through this fast so we have time at the end because I know you'll have questions. So number 7, how are you going to ensure that this is effective? So are you using logbooks? What else are you using to document that you're doing the monitoring and that you have appropriately responded? So provide an example of the document or the log being used to collect the information. It should have date, time, location, and who did it. You need to document your analysis results and observations and comparison to control limits. You need to describe and require documentation of specific actions that are taken. Describe and require documentation of additional actions if you still keep exceeding. And then you include your routine surveillance for Legionnaire's disease as part of the validation protocol. So how do you do your line list? What are you doing to keep checking, any pneumonia cases that come up during the course of someone's stay? You also need to describe what you want to be sampled. So how many samples are being collected? Where are you sampling? What protocol is being used and what analytical method is being used? And is this an appropriate representation of your water systems? So this applies for chlorine, for your disinfection levels, for your temperature levels, pH if you're going to test that, but then also if you're going to be testing for Legionella itself. So how do you want it sampled? Who's going to do the analysis? You think about that ahead of time. Understand what CDC recommends. Understand what the AIHA recommendations say for doing testing so that when you get your results back, it's what you asked for and not just what somebody thought was a good idea. There should be a testing frequency that's appropriate for the risk of Legionellosis in your facility. Maybe annual sampling isn't enough. You want to make sure that your water management plan is working. Your water management plan should indicate what events, in addition to routine testing, will trigger additional testing. So what happens if you have to shut down a wing to do some type of a plumbing upgrade? How will you check that? What happens when you want to return a wing back to service? What happens if there's a water main break in your county or nearby, or, they shut it down because they want to add someone else onto the line on your street? What happens if you get a report of Legionellosis from us? What happens if we say, well, we've had a possible case, they weren't in your building, for 14 days completely, but if there's a second case, you'll be looped into this. You want to be able to go to your system, check and make sure everything is going according to plan. And you need to have a context for interpreting the results, both from the percentage of positive samples, the location, the amount of Legionella in each sample, the trends over time, and the type of Legionella being detected, because you know there's different species, different strains. And then section 8 is how are you going to communicate this? So how do you communicate between the team member and the administration on what results and actions are taken when implementing it? Who's responsible for communicating it to other entities such as the health department or any labs or other facilities you're working with? It needs to specify that the water management plan is reviewed annually. It has to be. And when there's been changes to the facility building water system, including the addition of new equipment or features that could generate aerosols. It has to be a living document that's reviewed and updated as necessary, minimally on an annual basis. All of your implementation activities should be documented, including testing results, corrective action takes, and communication between team members and building facility management. This isn't just for KDPH. It's not just for us. It's for you, it's for liability, and it's for the protection of you are all valued, incredibly valuable to your county and to your region. And if there's problems with Legionella in a healthcare facility are huge problems for a region. They just are. And so taking this time to take care of this and make this a priority for you and for documenting everything as it should be is really helpful to you delivering the best healthcare possible. So, any questions?
So it does look like we have one question here, Nancy, and I'm not sure if Maura will be able to be rolling in here shortly, but when performing an inspection of a facility, is every room and area inspected for dead legs or issues? For example, rooms that were converted to offices?
We don't, if you are looking for dead legs, you should look everywhere in your building. It's like a little hide, I mean, it sounds silly. It's a hidey hole for microorganisms. It's a place that's quiet. The water it still communicates with the rest of the water system. And we've had situations where they just cannot get it out of, a certain fixture. And it could be that there's a dead leg just up of that system or just up of where that outlet is that has a real concentrated growth, and it just, periodically bursts and sends a bunch of microorganisms out and into that shower. So no, you do need to check everywhere, even converted offices particularly.
There was a question about finding the templates, having a specific link. So Kirsten, I know, put in the link from your presentation, but additionally, everybody should have all the links that Dr. Johnson was referring to. Everyone should have those in their presentation deck that was available to them. There's another question. Any thoughts on adoption of ASHRAE 514 released last year that addresses water quality for chemical, physical, and biological?
I think I'm not fully familiar with that because we're really just focused on what was present when CSTE was putting this together, and the typical ASHRAE 12 and what's the other one? The one that's from 2021. So those probably have some bearing in it as well, and I think that the facilities folks should consider that because your water system is really critical to the performance to healthcare in your facility. That this is, we know there's 37 different organisms that can live commensurate with Legionella. And, oh, okay. I will look into that, and maybe next week I'll address that. I will look into ASHRAE 514 and check. But yeah, that's the problem. We do look at Legionella, but really Legionella is representative of quite a number of other organisms that could be present. We've had situations where we come back with negative Legionella testing, but overgrowth of Pseudomonas, and the facility says, "Ah, we're good, no Legionella." Oh no, that's not it. I'll look into that for you, Mike.
Thank you for that. There is a question about, will the recording and slides be available for review? Yes, they will. It'll take a minute because we'll have to get them put to the site and through all the process, but yes, they will be available. There's another question. Are we required to report to the state if we have Legionella findings within our water system that are out of range?
Have what we have, and I'm getting 2 weeks ahead in Stacy Davidson's presentation, but the governing authority, our Kentucky administrative regulations, we rely on reportable disease. So if you see that you're out of line, but this is why you need to have procedures in place that say that you know how that you're going to address it, and you document everything you've done to bring it back into line, and you say, whoo, we nobody got sick on this, we're good. Because if somebody does get sick down the line and there is a reportable disease, and we come in and we understand that you've had sampling been going on for months previously, where you've been documenting that you've been out of control in certain areas and you haven't done anything, that kind of makes it worse. And it's a big liability for you. Because it could be attorneys would love to get their hands on stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. In the example from the Flint facility, Hospital A, as they referred to them in the epi review that they did, the hospital did have elevated levels of Legionella in their water system. Now, admittedly, they were doing multiple different remediation strategies throughout that experience for them. But I think that, it does become quite a risk when you know that you've got a problem within your facility and then you have multiple patients that come up positive. When it comes to construction and dead legs, is there a specific requirement for how much dead leg is allowed? There are various requirements: 2D, 3D, 4D, and 6D.
That's a facilities engineer question. I'm not sure if there are any Kentucky regulations on that specifically. I just know that if you have a location where the water is stagnant, the water is warm, and if the disinfection becomes low, you have a situation where biofilm can develop. So we don't need, I don't know about the particulars of how much is allowed, but if you have a significant area where biofilm can develop, you have a risk.
I think that Mike's question is
Right.
specific to when contractors cut pipes off.
That's that's up to you. I mean, and you just have to understand the ecology of Legionella. And so that's not my role. That's not DPH's role to tell you about where to cut a pipe off. That comes into plumbing. But we just know that biofilm grows where it's warm, stagnant, and low disinfection, and you have microorganism growing.
There's a question: where can we find the acceptable range
Of
I'm assuming of Legionella. I guess,
EDC publishes there's different document, ASHRAE will give you some standards. CDC gives you some, typically you shouldn't have more than one colony forming unit in potable water. It really doesn't matter on the strain. That's a fallacy. LP1 is most commonly detected, but that's what a urinary antigen test will specifically find. It won't find the other strains. LP2 through 14, and there's even more LPs than that, will still cause disease. And we've seen outbreaks with LP6 or LP7. So you can't say one LP is worse than another, but there shouldn't be more than one.
there's a question, do you do site visits to help facilities develop effective water management plans similar to the MDRO prevention program with the KDPH?
Well, this is our first, this is the first outreach that we've done, which is this program that we collaborated with Julia and the Kentucky Infection Prevention Training Center. So we're really excited about this. We have been discussing doing brown bags, maybe next month or following, if you need to have time to come in and look at this. You can get the regional infection preventists to come out and do a module 11, which is very helpful. And one of the first questions on there is, do you have a water management plan? And we're working really hard to get everybody to understand where these things are. So the brown bags sound like something that might be helpful maybe in the next month or so, once we get through the next 2 sessions, which I think will also be really helpful.
So what Nancy was referring to is that we have office hours every Tuesday.
Oh, that's it. Sorry. Yes.
No worries. From 12 to 1. And so we had planned that after this series, right, you'll get a whole lot of information. And a lot of times when I'm done with an educational series, I go back and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then I'm like, oh, I have a question. What am I supposed to do with that? Or what does this look like? And so what we'll have is during those office hours, our colleagues from KDPH on to help to answer some of those questions. So we'll send out the dates and times that those will be. It'll just be a open door. So come ask your question and you are welcome to then stay or go after that. Another question, does the less than 1 CFU range apply to Legionella non-pneumophilia also?
I don't believe so, but you should just think about your system and think about your patients and think about the condition of the water. So I was just talking with a mechanical engineer the other day, and he said, Legionella testing itself isn't really even as helpful in evaluating a system as really understanding temperature and disinfection levels and pH and maybe even solids in a system. So I understand how the water is behaving and whether it's getting, when it comes out of this faucet, it has sufficiently heated or disinfected to the point that I should not expect Legionella to come out. Legionella testing is really tough. I mean, they're trying to capture a live organism. And you can do PCR, but it's got some problems. And the gold standard is still culturing. And culture still takes, at least a week to get some early results. And then if you have multiple kinds of contamination in there, you can have growth problems. There's a lot of issues to actually measuring Legionella. And if you can show, it's really far more important to show that you've got good temperature control throughout the system, that you have good pH and especially the disinfection. And you want to look at both free and total chlorine, because chloramine, it depends on what's being used in your system to disinfect, but you really need a good evaluation of that. And you'll learn a lot more mechanically about your system than just testing for Legionella. CDC gave me, I was talking with the woman that Elizabeth Hannapel there, and she said they had a situation where they had a building that had an outbreak. They had 2 different labs there. Both took sequential samples from the same tap. One grew enormously and one was barely there. And it's because the release of Legionella is more sporadic, can be more sporadic and burst-like than being a constant sort of from the whole system coming through. That's why often when we talk about sampling, we'll talk about this next week, it's really good to take a pre-flush sample, like right out the first thing out of the tap, then let it run and come to temperature and take a second sample then. You see one of what's been setting in the fixture and one that's in the whole system. And, when somebody turns the fixture on, if there's a fixture right by the head of the bed and you turn it on, that's what's going to be aerosolized right away. And you miss that if you flush it. So, it's whether you have non-pneumophila or not is, I don't know. The whole picture is part of it. And that's why you need a really good water management plan that has kind of thought these things out ahead of time.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Dr. Johnson or comments?
There is a training. So if you go to CSTE, there is a training session, which is really the recorded session when our contractor that kind of quarterbacked the whole toolkit, he delivered this program or he delivered the toolkit to the CSTE membership. So you can go and look at that. And then another really good tool, and we'll talk about this again next week, is to complete the LD Prevent training that's on the CDC website. And that really helps you look at how to put a water management plan together and how to use it where you are. So look up LD Prevent. I can put some links in there. But that training will help you see what it looks like and what it really looks like to have it in place and working as it should.
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Kirsten looks like she put
Yes.
that link in the chat. So thank you for that. And then there was the question of when is the brown bag? So those are typically Tuesdays from 12 to 1. But we will send out clear communication on which Tuesday or Tuesdays it will be that Nancy and her team or someone within that team will be present to help to not only answer questions, but to help to guide if you've got something that you're not quite sure, or is this a nice place to start, or am I going in the wrong direction completely? So. All right, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Nancy, if that's okay.
Sure.
For the CE information. And thank you very much for this great presentation. I think it's going to go very nicely into the presentation that we have planned for next week, which is, okay, I've got this plan. Now, what am I supposed to do? To Dr. Johnson's point of what's my mitigation strategy, right? So I've got these results. And they're not what I thought they were going to be for whatever reason. What do I need to do so that I'm prepared prior to collecting any kind of information in that setting? So that will be next Thursday. And we look forward to everyone being there.